How does the Utah Utes quarterback situation impact this week one game between the Florida Gators and Utah Utes? We're going to talk about that and much more here on Locked On Gators.
You are Locked On Gators, your daily podcast on the Florida Gators. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Locked On Gators, part of the Locked On Podcast and Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day. We are available daily and free wherever you listen to the podcast. Happy Friday. I'm Brandon Olsen. Find me on Twitter at WNS_Brandon. Find all my written work with Whole Nine Sports, Giants Country, NFL 33. And joining me today is going to be Brandon Carroll from AllGators with Fan Nation SI and Carroll's Cadence, his own YouTube channel, which you should check out after listening to this because it's how we talk about recruiting. He talks about it more also today on Carroll's Cadence. But now, here's Brandon Carroll. Joining me now for Locked On Gators, like he does every Friday episode, is Brandon Carroll of AllGators and Carroll's Cadence. And we're talking today, we're going to start talking about Utah's quarterback situation again, because we talked about it a couple weeks ago at this point, and the way that Utah's head coach Kyle Whittingham talked about Cam Rising's injury earlier this week made me feel like it's less likely that he's going to play than it felt 2 weeks ago, because I feel like the way you word things when you go, yeah, barring him getting cleared, I feel like when you say barring him getting cleared, you're kind of saying, we're not expecting it, but that's kind of the situation. Then it's going to be Bryson Barnes because Brandon Rose got hurt during the scrimmage last week. I think it's lacerated liver, which is a wild injury to get during a scrimmage, especially. It's like, yeah, that's going to happen. But how does Cam Rising's availability or lack thereof impact kind of your feeling about this game? Because I know that I said I feel way better about Florida, and Utah was like, no. So they got really mad about that one. But what's your stance on it?
I think it's hard to sit back and say you don't feel better about Florida's chances if Cam Rising's not the one that trots out as the starter, because he's been their incumbent starter really for the past 2 seasons. Barnes has had some opportunities, but he's proved inconsistent in the times that he has played. And it's been Rising's job since since his sophomore year. So there's a lot of kind of question marks going in for both teams. But with Utah having that struggle at the quarterback position, I think it's kind of asinine to say, yeah, this is going to have no effect on this game at all, because Rising is one of the most polished quarterbacks in college football. He's one of the best college football quarterbacks in the nation heading into 2023, whether he's 100% healthy or not for week 1. And he was that last year too. I think that it's, a steady progression, and we've started to see a guy like Jonathan Odom, who got hurt 2 weeks earlier with a very similar injury. Obviously, each progression back from an ACL tear, whether there was additional damage that wasn't announced within the knee, are always things that get brought up. But Odom's a skill position player. He has to move in space, and he's now, for Florida, ready to fully participate. He dropped that black no contact jersey. So I think Rising's on a progression to where at this point it's a game time decision, like a legitimate game time decision for Cam Rising. And I know Kyle Whittingham's been a little on and off, just skeptical of it. And I think he's trying to temper expectations by the way he's wording things. But I do think that there is some, there's still a chance that Rising's able to go. But if not, it's a positive for Florida. Unfortunately, it's result via injury, but you can't say it's not, helping kind of push the favor in Florida's direction. Not saying that Florida should be the favored one, but just in general, it gets closer because Rising's not able to go.
Yeah, I feel like the thing with Florida, I said this on Wednesday's show or around the midweek, where I was like, hey, I think a big advantage that Florida has, and maybe advantage is the wrong word, but a big plus for them going into this game is that regardless of who the quarterback is for Utah, their defensive game plan doesn't change. Like, it's like, hey, we're either going to be really aggressive against Cam Rising when he's not as mobile as he's been and when he's going to have to deal with that, or we're being really aggressive against Bryson Barnes, who in his career has 200 snaps played and 109 of them are handing the football off. So he's got 91 snaps where he either throws it or runs it. I feel like, yeah, being a very aggressive defense gives you that advantage, especially when, again, regardless of who QB is, you could just go in there with the same approach you were going to have anyway. It's just you have a different target in your defense's eyes.
Yeah, for sure. And I think obviously Rising in the past has presented that mobility that Florida struggled with. Just, we saw it last year at points, and how he just found a way to be opportunistic with the way that he ran the football. And I like to call him an opportunistic runner because he's not someone that's going to tuck it and run on first instinct. But when he does decide to tote the rock, he is talented at doing so. He can make the opportunistic plays, get first downs, push the ball downfield, and just keep that offense ticking. So even if he does play, that won't be a major factor just because, he's not going to be 100%, unless, just like Kyle Whittingham said, if something just changes in the next 2 weeks, something barring, him being cleared, in being able to fully participate. And I know that's not necessarily a indication that everything is 100% okay. It's just an indication that they are ready to go in terms of, like, there's no more limitations on them. They're getting fully ramped back up. But Austin Armstrong's licking his chops. And I know and I've talked about it before on my show, that no matter who trots out there, Austin Armstrong is going to have some juice to him standing on that sideline in week 1, just because first game as SEC coordinator, he's 30 years old. He's known for bringing that energy. And I think that as a result, them boys up front are going to bring the heat. It'll come with the 4 down linemen. It'll come in simulated pressures. It might not come in terms of just him sitting in the house. Like, he's not going to send 8 guys or anything like that, but he'll send a lot of simulated pressures, throw a lot of different looks at either quarterback that comes out here. And whether it's Bryson Barnes, who's inexperienced, or Cam Rising, who's potentially playing on an 80%, knee, it's a daunting task for them to have to shoulder that load and shoulder that burden of, the 4 to 5 dudes coming at you every single play that are really told, hey, we're getting after him today.
Yeah, I think for me, that's the biggest thing where I don't even care about how it works out specifically, just like the game plan and the approach there of going up front. You're going to see, fire zone blitzes. You're going to see creepers, sim pressures. You're going to see all these things up front that are different. And then on the back end, it's going to be constantly like just showing you the same stuff pre-snap and then rotating. Where for me, that's why if it's Bryson Barnes, I think Cam Rising would even struggle with that because, yeah, Cam Rising is very experienced, but NFL quarterbacks struggle with that kind of stuff. So I would imagine Cam Rising would as well. But if it's Bryson Barnes, I'm just thinking he's gonna have a bad day if he starts just with that insanely aggressive, complex, and constantly misleading or misdirecting defense. I'm just like, yeah, it's not going to be a fun time for Utah if Bryson Barnes is QB1 on August 31st.
Yeah, it's not an ideal, time to step into a starting role, because one, Florida's defense hasn't been great over the past few years. Obviously, it's expected to take a jump forward, but you don't really know what you're getting. So if it does take that step forward starting in week 1, Bryson Barnes is the first byproduct of that. He's the first, how do I put it? He's the first, like, there's a word I'm looking for, but I can't quite find it. Just victim. I don't, and that's not the word I want to use because it's
that's
not
what I want to use. Okay,
it's just because there's so many different things that Austin Armstrong did at Southern Miss that can translate to the SEC, to this matchup, obviously, with Utah being in the Pac-12, just Power 5 football in general, which is a term that I will use this year and this last year only. But just having that as your first career start, knowing you have a guy that just loves to send pressure, loves to be aggressive, play press man, operate in cover 3, and really just keep everything tight tight windows, deny the ball defense is how they've quoted it at Florida. Jason Marshall Jr., Devin Moore, Jalen Kimber have all said this is deny the ball defense. That's how we're playing this year. And I think that having that as a first-time starter, at least on this stage, is, like you said, not ideal, or can kind of cause him to be a quote-unquote victim, even though I hate using that word because it just sounds like I'm trying to get in the beef with Utah fans that you have gotten yourself into over the past few weeks.
Hey, yeah, put your nukes up, Utah fans. I'll call you victims. I don't care because you're going to feel like a victim August 31st around midnight Eastern time. That's how it's going to be for you. For a championship team like the Florida Gators and Billy Napier are trying to build, it's all about making sure that every player is a perfect fit. It's the same when it comes to your vehicle. Every part needs to fit just right. So, the next time you need parts and accessories, head to eBay Motors. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, you can be sure every part you need fits just right the first time around. Just add your ride to my garage, look for the green check to know the part will fit, or your money back, because just like in sports, confidence is the name of the game when you shop on eBay Motors. And with over 122 million parts to choose from, you're back in the game in no time. Get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices, which is the most important part, on ebaymotors.com. Gator Nation, let's ride. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. But so moving on to injury updates, but on a more positive side, Florida as a whole really is just, they're starting to get healthier. Like, yes, you lost Justice Boone. You've had a few hiccups, but you're getting back. Shamar James returned with a non-contact injury, or with a non-contact jersey. Jonathan Odom is back and he shed the no contact. Arlis Boardingham shed the no contact. How have they kind of all looked progression wise, since these are all players that I'm fully expecting to play a good deal of snaps this year?
Yeah, I think the tight ends specifically have looked very good. I'm not sure exactly what Arlis was dealing with. I know they've been very cautious with how they've went about this fall practice regime schedule thing, just because obviously you don't want to push guys past these, to where they're not ready to go when the season rolls around. I know Jason Marshall Jr. had a soft tissue injury. They just were like, all right, we're just going to pump the brakes here. We're going to sit him out 2 days and then he'll get back on the field, which he did. I think Boardingham was something similar where they knew that, it wasn't something super serious, but they just wanted to take it slow. Obviously, Odom coming back from that ACL injury, they just were letting him progress at his regular schedule. It's been, as of today, actually, he got hurt December 17th, 18th, in the bowl game, 17th, I think. So it's been exactly a year. I know it'll be just over a year, or not a year, like 8 months, 9 months since that injury. Tomorrow it'll be 9 months in a day. And so when this show airs, I'm sorry, I broke that wall, but there's, yeah, my bad. But he's shown that progression. He's shown like he's moving well in space. He looks to where he's getting back to the point where he is like, dropping that no contract jersey. He's full participation. He looks like he's going to be a factor for this offense, which he's going to need to be. So is Boardingham, just because tight ends and Graham Mertz mesh well and working over the middle of the field. So having those pieces back, having those pieces in your arsenal offensively are big helps. And then Shamar James, that he's 1 day back. He's still, kind of going through that rehabilitative schedule, but he's right on schedule for being able to play week 1. That we were told when he got injured it'd be a week or two. He's fallen within that threshold, and I expect him to, I'll get a better chance to look at him today, and then I'll, kind of see where he's at and see if there's, any concerns, which I don't assume there to be, because he's back on the practice field and participating with his position group, almost full time.
Yeah. I just I don't know what it was, but I was just thinking this game is just going to be like my dream, because I'm a big tight end guy. So it's like Utah's going to come out in 12, 13 and Florida's getting their tight ends healthy. So I was just thinking this game is going to be just a dream for me, and I'm just ready to see that. But that's just a completely irrelevant side note. But this is part is obviously impossible without being in the room with them. But and obviously not a doctor. But should we be expecting Shamar James to be restricted at all leading up to the game? Because I feel like at this point, like we're 2 weeks out, we were told it'd be 7 to 10 days. He hit that timeline, but I feel like it's also one of those things where it was a knee issue, and I am always hesitant to just be like, "It'll be good to go," because like knees just are the worst thing on the planet when it comes to injury wise.
Yeah. Do you mean practice limitations and things like that leading up?
Game time, will he be golden?
Yes, he'll be good game one. That's always been the story there. Obviously, I think they're going to be careful, and because he injured it so early in fall camp, that gives them the ability to say, "All right, this scrimmage two on Friday, we're going to pump the brakes there. You're not going to be fully active for that scrimmage." But then we get closer to week one, we get closer to some actual football being played. That's when you're like, "All right, restrictions are coming off. You're our best player on defense. Go get after it." Because he is. Shamar James is the most talented player on the defensive side of the football. No kind of knocks towards Princely Umanmielen, who's a very close second. But Shamar James is that dude. Actually, Jason Marshall Jr. is that dude. Shamar James is second. Princely Umanmielen's third. Sorry. But just having those, a Shamar James there and having him go through the individual things, just doing what is expected of him in year two, you're able to kind of give him that leniency of pumping the brakes, letting him get healthy, so that week one he can just go out and hoop, because that's what they're going to look for him to do. And this year is just hoop, get us make tackles, get us the football, and just make your presence known, which I think he can do better than anyone on the field for Florida's defense.
Yeah, as you were like, "Oh, yeah, Shamar, Princely," I was like, how wild is it that I feel like it's been quite some time since we've had a dude at every level that we're like,
Yeah.
they're a dude, and we know they are, and it's like, we've got the edge rusher there, like, Brandon Cox wasn't it. Princely is there, you got Shamar, got Jason Marshall, like, this is it's like an awesome time to be a Florida Gators fan where you can at least see that there is legitimate elite talent on this team at every level of the field. Whether or not you care about depth or side pieces, just having legitimately a guy at every spot is just an awesome time for Florida Gators fans.
Yeah, and I think it's awesome for just covering the team in general. Obviously, I'm not a fan per se, just because out of objectivity and unbiased coverage of the team with Fan Nation, Sports Illustrated, but just having those pieces, enjoy, because I am a fan of good football. I'm a fan of high level football, and getting to watch that week in and week out with some of these pieces is always going to be fun. It's just how Georgia coverage, reporters feel every time they step into a practice or a game. They're like, I know I'm about to go watch 13 NFL dudes out of this 22-man lineup every time I step on. And obviously Florida's not there yet, but it looks like that's the way they could be trending with the recruiting classes, with the, who they've brought in and how they're developing at all levels. So I think that, it's just fun for Florida, and you're starting to see the dividends of this Billy Napier regime, and it's trending upward just in a talent, accumulation standpoint and a talent production standpoint, as you have the Jason Marshall Jr., who's probably going to be a first-round pick in 2024 draft, Princely Umanmielen, who's going to be right on that line, if not being a second-round pick, if he performs this year at the rate that many expect him to do. Shamar James, who will eventually go first round. Devin Moore, who's probably, if once he gets going, is going to be a dude. And then you just have so many different pieces at different spots, not to mention the guys offensively. So the talent's starting to look up at the University of Florida, and that's fun for fans, obviously coaches, the players themselves, and even the people that cover it with an unbiased standpoint toward Florida, like myself.
Yeah, Zach, I think it was, that tweeted out the link, the video of Princely working on the long arm, and
Yeah.
I was just like, I love it. I love
Yeah.
it. Ever since I remember, it was a long time ago, But ever since seeing like Khalil Mack do it, I was like, oh, that's a beautiful pass rush. And so now I love it. I love seeing Princely work that into his repertoire there, and hopefully first round pick. But you mentioned the 2024 recruiting. We've seen recruiting classes, the way they're looking, talent is coming up. Florida added to the 2024 class yet again earlier this week. They got the commitment from Wardell Mack, 4-star corner from Louisiana. Let's say Wardell Mack winds up being the highest rated corner in the 2024 class for the Florida Gators. Are you cool with him being corner one? And just to be clear, I don't want to sound like I'm against him at all. I am cool with him being corner one if he winds up being that. I just wanted to get your take on that as well.
Yeah, I have no problem with Wardell Mack being corner one in this class. He actually, even before he committed to Florida, way back when he actually originally got offered, I became a big fan of his. I think he's great in kind of press man coverage, which is what Florida's going to be looking to play moving forward. Very physical at the line of scrimmage, great ball skills. I think he attacks the ball very well. He's one of the more polished in technique corners that we've seen in this class. I do think, he can get in trouble sometimes with just being grabby, whether it's on the line of scrimmage or working in space. But I do think that, his offensive background kind of shows in how he plays defensively, which is exactly what Corey Raymond wants. And they had some concerns with him being undersized initially, but he came in to Florida in his last visit, measured in at 6'1.5". They were like, all right, that 6 is in front. Let's run it. So that was really when he got that green light. You saw that picture that he posted with him and all the other commits. So he's been this is not something new to Florida staff. They weren't surprised like we were, because I wrote a commitment story weeks ago just because I was like, I have a feeling that this is going to pop sometime soon, and I think it is toward Florida. And so we got it up early, but when it popped, I was like, oh goodness, all right, here we go. Let's try to figure this thing out. I hope I actually wrote it, and I hope it wasn't just something I made up in my head. He is talented enough to be that cornerback one. Obviously, he doesn't have the length that they've coveted. Or he does on his frame, but just not to, relative to a Jakeem Jackson, who's very similar in the way that he played in high school. Just on a, he's 6'2", and he's all of it, probably pushing 6'3". But there's so many traits that Wardell suggests that makes me say, yeah, this is Wardell. He's going to lock up his side of the field when he gets to the University of Florida. And I think Raymond's going to mold him into being one of his next pieces on that side.
I dig Wardell. I'm cool sticking with that forever. But even just your opinion, the same thing that we had Brian Smith yesterday, Locked On Recruiting Insider, who talked about Wardell Mack being corner one. He was just like, the dude can line up and play cover one and just do that. And that's a very impressive thing to be able to do. Just line up, play press man, be physical. So I feel like it's kind of the consensus is clear here. He can do it. But what else for you, at least, do the Florida Gators need to kind of add to wrap up the 2024 class, even including the cherry on top pieces, like the plus ones that we spoke about a month or so ago?
Yeah, I think at this point, they're really just looking at those plus ones for the most part. Obviously, they want to add another cornerback, whether that's Xavier Mincy out of Mainland or Jameer Grimsley, flip him from Alabama, which they'll continue on both of those until the very end. Obviously, there's been some buzz regarding both of them. Even though Grimsley's committed to Alabama, we know that Corey Raymond is going to remain a constant in his, on his phone. That notification is going to pop consistently from now until signing day. So those two are really the main pieces they're looking at moving forward. They've wanted to take 3 cornerbacks from the start. They got Teddy Foster a few weeks ago. They just got Wardell Mack, who, for a second, I want to kind of backtrack to him. One thing I like about Mack as well is that, yes, he can do the cover one press man. He can really just get in their faces, but I think he can also be someone that can drop in zone. He fits well in that cover 3 scheme because when everything's in front of him, he works so well at attacking the football. And with that offensive background, I think he can attack the football at a high rate, play in space, and kind of be a safety at points for Florida when, even though he's working off the boundary, because he's just able to work back toward the football, make plays, and because of the offensive background, if he does get an interception, he's able to crib it. So that's another positive for Florida there. But he's there, so now they're looking for a second or a third, I should say, cornerback to pair with those two. And then you got L.J. McCray, who's their highest remaining target. Like he is number one on the board. L.J. McCray is our guy that we're, this is what they're saying. They're saying that's our guy that we're going to get, whether whatever it takes. We're getting L.J. McCray. A lot of teams think he is the top defensive end in this 2024 class. Georgia agrees. It's really a Georgia and Florida race at this point. Florida State and Miami are still involved, but I think they're a tier below what Florida is right now. And then you obviously have the Jeremiah Smiths, which I hate to break it to Florida fans. He's going to Ohio State. I just have a hard, if he was going to flip, I think it would have happened already. And, there was some buzz for Florida this summer, which I thought was their best chance to get him. They didn't. He stuck it out with the Buckeyes. I think that's where he ends up. You have, the ability to potentially get a Chance Robinson, even though that's cooled. I think Jordan Ross ends up at Tennessee. So there's just, some remaining prospects out there like L.J. McCray, like Xavier Mincy, like Jameer Grimsley that are really the main focuses for Florida at this point.
Yeah, you mentioned Grimsley committed to Alabama right now, but Florida's obviously always going to stay in contact. That's been a thing of, hey, good recruiting staffs stay in contact even if a kid is committed because, hey, even if there's a goalie doesn't mean you can't score on it, right? But thank you so much, Brandon. This is Brandon Carroll from AllGators and Carroll's Cadence. Catch him every Friday on Locked On Gators and every Monday, Wednesday, Friday on Carroll's Cadence. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day. We are available daily and free wherever you listen to podcasts. We'll be back a little bit later today because we're doing 2 days for some of these days. All right, we got some bonus shows for you. So we will be back talking running backs later today. For Locked On Gators, I'm Brandon Olsen. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at WNS_Brandon. Find all my written work with Whole 9 Sports, Giants Country, NFL 33. And I will see you all later.